Welcome to the Teacher in Classroom 21 podcast, and yes, for the first time ever, we are video also. I am extremely excited to be sharing this space with you. We have today recorded a wonderful, almost 1 hour long video interview with an inspirational colleague who sat in this exact chair, using this exact microphone here, recording an interview with Hannah Wilson, Executive Head Teacher of Aureus Secondary School, as well as Aureus Primary School. Hannah may well have come to your attention after being in the national press earlier this year in 2018, in May 2018, when headlines hit the Daily Mail, the Sun, the Express, all about Aureus' school dinner policy and this notion of only serving water and halal meat. Controversial, provocative and totally misrepresentative headlines were written about Hannah, her school and her school community, and Hannah dealt with that so incredibly well. Hannah is also a co-founder of Women Ed, a wonderful movement supporting women into educational leadership in schools, in academy trusts and beyond. Hannah just got back from an Action Aid trip to Mozambique. A brilliant experience which we're going to share with you and we're going to talk about within the interview, and I really encourage you to hear the story that Hannah tells about that experience. Finally, we're going to talk about values-led leadership, what it means today truly to be a leader in education, and Hannah shares her views, her opinions, and for any leader or aspiring leader out there, it's something you must have a listen to, have a watch and comment on and think about. Please share this video far and wide, make sure it gets to those who would benefit. Massive thank you to Hannah for coming in and spending so much time with us in her holidays. In fact, on her way to her actual holiday. Hannah, you're a legend in our eyes. We appreciate you so much. Here's the interview with Hannah. Absorb, enjoy, and let us know what you think. All the best.
I've improved by a whole grade.
I've improved.
By a whole grade.
By a whole grade.
By a whole grade.
My teacher isn't just Mr. Maddock. It's a whole teaching team made up of James, Mike and Marta.
My classroom's all about doing and applying. My days standing at the front of the classroom with a PowerPoint are long gone.
I master every concept by learning at my own pace.
I spend 100% of my class time interacting and supporting individual students.
I move on only when the moment is right for me, not the whole class.
I know what each and every student is mastering and struggling on at every moment.
I know exactly what I need to learn next, and I can go back and review material at any time.
I spend my teaching time supporting and inspiring, not planning, delivering and marking.
I can learn from anywhere at any time.
I can switch off when school closes, knowing they are learning from the best.
My teacher has my homework marked before I get to class.
I set every piece of homework at the start of the year.
I'm 2 weeks ahead of my expected progress.
I can track everyone's progress with a swipe of a finger.
I can track my own progress and set my own targets.
I now have time to focus on developing the skills of every learner in my classroom.
I know exactly what it means to explain, evaluate and analyse, and I'm not afraid of any exam.
My lessons are now far more about the skills and the application, not just the content itself.
I've completely remodeled what it means to be a teacher in my classroom.
Hannah Wilson, welcome to the Teacher in Classroom 21 podcast, and today actually TV show somewhat.
Hi, James.
Really appreciate you being here. Seriously, thank you. I'm going to start here, Hannah. Hannah, how was your summer? And please tell us about your Action Aid trip to Mozambique.
How's my summer? My summer has been busy. So we are opening a second school in a week and a half's time. So we had quite a lot to do with the project completion in the first week or so. It's also been a really busy year as our first year of a secondary school opening. So we had quite a lot to clear before we could properly go away and relax. And then people did say to me, so why are you not going to go and lie on a beach for 2 weeks and read a book like normal human beings?
We did that.
I'd agreed to do an Action Aid project the year before and ended up deferring it because I had too much going on. And maybe I've got a sick bit in me about not like just doing something crazy in the summer, but for me, it was an opportunity to go away and do something, but properly switch off. So even though we were volunteering and even though we were building and sort of like doing quite a lot from a community perspective, physically it was very different, and mentally it was very different. And I was with 20 female teachers from the UK who'd all volunteered to be there. And it really was an amazing experience travelling to rural, very deprived part of Mozambique, and building classroom walls.
I saw you in a trench in one photo.
I actually still have a hole in my knee from that trench. Yeah, we did the foundations. So we fundraised all the money. ActionAid ran the project, and then we were working with local builders. And we got there on the Sunday and had the opening ceremony with the elders in the community and all the different stakeholders. And the Monday morning, we went and broke the ground and started putting the foundations in. So we really were sort of like from the very get-go kickstarting the build. And they said that in the week we were there, they achieved what you'd normally achieve in 2 months with a team of 5 people. So even though we didn't finish, we get a weekly update now from ActionAid. So as when we left it, we had put in all the foundations and all the metal work. I think we were on our 3rd layer of bricks going up. It was getting pick up momentum.
You mentioned there are 20 women. Was it a women-only trip, women-specific trip, or accident, or it happened to be 20 women?
Well, it was interesting. Like, men were welcome, but it kind of came out of a partnership with Women Ed. I've done some work with ActionAid over the last couple of years. They come to a lot of our events. We're very aligned in who we are, like shared vision and values. They rebranded and refocused last year to really do more about empowering girls in education across the world. And Mozambique's the 3rd poorest country in the world. Only 10% of the country are employed. I find that staggering.
That's stunning.
Only 40% of pupils progress to secondary school, and it's rife with sort of like early child marriage and FGM, and women haven't got rights. So this school was an opportunity for us to do a project. Initially, it was going to be a library, because all the research about when you raise literacy levels for adults, you then sort of like improve the whole community experience. But we didn't fundraise quite enough money for the library. But actually, they don't need libraries, they need classrooms. Like, this school had 450 kids in 3 classrooms. The kids go to school on shifts. And when they're not in the classroom learning, they're outside playing unsupervised. That's
an amazing concept. The kids go to school in shifts. I mean, what does it actually look like?
Morning, afternoons. They have 80 kids in the class.
Wow.
And not enough desks, not enough benches. And the rest of the children are free range outside. It was completely mind-blowing to see, to be honest with you. So we scooped up all the kids who weren't in lessons, and they became our little helpers and pushed wheelbarrows and helped us build fences and stuff. So actually, I've worked in Tanzania as well. It was much further behind what I'm used to. But the school also lends its space to a women's circle. So ActionAid do like girls' leadership projects about the next generation, but they also do closing the gap work on the current generation. So there were 35 adults from probably like late 20s up to their 60s who had walked 8 kilometres to come for a free literacy lesson. And I think that was the most powerful thing of the whole trip, like just the gratitude and the hope in the room about the differences they'll be able to make to their own lives, but also to their children's lives as well.
How has it affected you, the experience, I mean?
I don't think I've completely decompressed yet. I think it's one of those situations where you're in it and it's quite intense, it's very profound, and when we left it was quite emotional, and it's taken me a week just to catch up on myself. Like, it was 10 days of getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and building and digging and like using muscles you don't normally use in the summer holidays. So we're talking about the legacy, we're talking about how we can continue the partnership, and I think that's what the local community really appreciated in their farewell speeches and their closing speeches. They said about the fact that we had to send money, we'd actually raised money and gone ourselves, and we were working shoulder to shoulder, and it wasn't like we were there with the money, giving it to them. It's
almost like, and there's an exchange of skills, right? Because, I mean, to learn to build, that's quite a skill, actually. So this is not just, I don't see it as a model of donation from what I understand. It seems much more like an exchange.
It is an exchange, and I think the 5 male local builders
they're a bit worried about their business.
It was really, they were quite quiet for the first few days.
I see.
And then we had a project, like a build project volunteer, Ant from Cumbria, and he did disclose after a few gins one night that Louise, the site manager, had said they were all really nervous about working with 20 women, but actually we were all really hardworking and they loved us.
What a surprise.
It's like busting gender stereotypes again. I think I'm not saying it would have been wholly different if men had been there, but we had to all learn the skills. There wasn't any pink jobs and blue jobs. There wasn't any mansplaining, dare I say it. we all had to do the hard labour. I've seen a lot of women back off and let the men do the hard work, and we do the wheelbarrow work. We all got stuck in, and we didn't wear any makeup for that week. Like, I think it was a very safe space for women to do something completely different to what they normally do.
It actually reminds me of something, I won't name the individual because I don't have permission, but a head teacher at an all-girls school once said to me is that in this school, the best computer coder is always a girl. In this school, and I have very mixed feelings about single-sex education. I think it can work for some and for others, but it reminds me of that. But one of the things I want to pick up on with you, Hannah, is you're clearly driven to support initiatives that improve opportunities for girls and for women. Where does that drive come from for you personally?
I get asked this quite a lot. I don't really know where it came from. I think my mum was self-employed and my mum was the breadwinner. So we were brought up in a house where mum and dad both worked and had their own businesses, but we were quite aware that it was mum who made most of the money. And my dad's quite a traditional bloke, but he didn't have an ego or an issue with the fact that mum made the money. So that was the kind of the model I got brought up with, I guess, and didn't really know it was different to a lot of my friends' situations. We were brought up like boys, and I say that in a loose sort of speak, but there were no glass ceilings for us. Like, we built tree houses, we went water skiing. My dad had a different sort of like outdoor activity every season. We canoed, we skied, we water skied, we did the works. So I think it was just that, I don't know, kind of the grit, the character education. The Wilson family basically don't sit down, don't relax, and get stuck into whatever they do. And I think it was just the sort of family ethos, really, about equality. But it was never labelled as such. So I think it was then when I went to Ghana when I was 19 for the summer doing Mali International. And that was probably my first sort of like out of the white bubble, rural bubble that is Devon. And I ended up reapplying for a different university and different course. And I think I had a bit of an epiphany whilst I was away. And I was going to read English, but I actually ended up changing my degree to post-colonial literature. Didn't want to study all the fuddy-duddy white men, which everyone else reads. And this course was quite quirky. So I think that's where my diversity kind of vein came through. And I don't know, I can't really pinpoint like one thing, perhaps. I've always been quite bold. So I don't know. So,
I mean, picking up on that, almost equality wasn't even a concept through childhood. Do you see that the same today for a majority of young people? If I ask the question specifically to a majority of girls, or do you still think that's an exception today?
I think it depends who you ask and what context they're in, really. I've worked in schools with very empowered young women and very empowered young men. And we're doing a lot of work at our school around sort of like boys appreciating the kind of the he for she kind of sense, but equally we've also created a space that's very safe for boys to be emotionally vulnerable. And I think there's stereotyping both ways, isn't there? We've got 3 or 4 powerhouse women-led leaders in our schools, so the girls haven't got a chance of being shy retiring. Do you find that in your own leadership and your recruitment that the women-led aspect, we're going to talk about this at length later on, but do you find that it helps that recruitment process? We've reflected a lot on this. It definitely helps. Like, you don't go into Twitter and grassroots and volunteering to do stuff to recruit a team, but I've got an amazing network of people who I know.
Yeah.
Statistically, I've only paid for 1 advert in 2 years, and I've recruited 70 staff. So if you think how much money I'm saving,
well, that's you say. I mean, for us, even as a completely different scaled employer to you guys, for example, we find that really difficult and extortionately expensive.
We've got a massive talent pool.
Wow.
I think startup schools appeal to a certain psyche, mentality of teacher.
Of course.
I think we're doing things differently around well-being and sort of like mental health, and that appeals to a lot of people. We're doing things differently. Like we've got non-negotiables. We don't have any bells. We don't have any detentions.
Why don't you have any bells?
It creates stress. We've got watches. Why do we need bells? Do you mean we kind of like, there's lots of things that jar in schools, and we've just made some very simple choices that don't individually seem bold, but collectively people think we're really radical. And I'm like, really? Like, it's common sense, isn't it? Why can't you just wear a watch? Why do you need a bell?
Yeah, it's probably as good a test of a society as anything as how simple a thing can actually seem radical.
Yeah, Yeah.
Right? To not have a school bell, I don't think is radical at
But
all.
how many times have teachers stood under the bell and it jars every single bone in your whole body? We don't have radios either, because I've spent 15 years B1 to B2.
Oh, I see,
Can you
yeah.
come to room 101? Seriously, pick up the phone. So it's just little things like that. So recruitment hasn't been an issue, but we are a very female-heavy staff. So we have reflected on this.
Are you comfortable with that personally? I mean, is it something I'm
no,
sure you
like,
celebrate it in some ways,
we've
but
got a very diverse staff.
Yeah.
We've got a very flexible staff. So look, we enable lots of part-time work. But I do think perhaps it puts off some men from coming to work with us because they see the gender equality and it's not for everyone. I also think it's interesting only being Key Stage 3. So if I was going to stereotype, particularly like maths and science teachers, and I think maths has been our hardest subject to recruit for, a lot of teachers want to teach Key Stage 4. And my SLT are on their knees, like after teaching Year 7 for a whole year. We haven't taught Year 7 for 10 years because you're used to doing the Year 11 intervention work. And it is exhausting teaching younger, needier, emotionally sort of like more engaged young people. I do think our recruitment will evolve as we go into Key Stage 4, and perhaps we'll pick up more men then. So statistically, and this made some of the men in my building shake, we've only got 7 men out of 70.
Wow, that's really fascinating. You might expect that in the primary sector, for example.
Primary, I've got 3. They're not teachers. I've got a TA and 2.
A 3 and a staff of how many, if you don't mind?
Out of 17.
Okay, so
we've done,
actually quite positive for the primary model. Yeah.
The primary model, we're not as diverse as I'd like to be in a kind of like BAMED sense. But we've got a lot of diversity in other ways, and we've got some gender parity. In the secondary school, we've got 3 male assistant heads and then 2 male teachers and 3 male support staff. And it is something I'm really conscious of. We're a boy-heavy school, and we're going to have to proactively recruit, I think, some male teachers and leaders to come and join us.
It's really interesting. I'm really interested in what you said about perhaps some men feel uncomfortable. I'm trying to place my mind as a man into that decision. I like to think it would make no difference to me, but perhaps on this level of conversation, the differences are much more subtle, much less conscious than you realise.
I don't know whether it would make it. I'm surmising there myself, but we've talked about that leadership team. Like, why are men not applying for our jobs? But in all honesty, we are having men apply, but the women are just blowing them out of the water at interview. And some of our interviews, like, we're all like, please, can the male teacher be really good? Please, we really need them. We haven't got enough male staff to go on residential trips. But if the candidate is best is a woman, then I'm not going to do the positive discrimination and give the man the job. I do think perhaps through our networks we've got more female connectivity in our individual groups, and because we're offering flexibility, we're getting more female applications. So the TES say that you get 17% more applications when you mention flexibility, and we put in all of our adverts and all of our job specs. So about a third of my teaching team have got some sort of variable working pattern. So that appeals to more women. I think perhaps the mental health and the well-being appeals to a certain type as well. So when you kind of layer it all up, perhaps we are creating quite a niche talent pool.
I think I'm sure you're right on those things too. I wonder what the impact of a truly inspirational female lead who is an advocate for women ed, for example, has. I wonder if as well. I haven't been to school, so I genuinely don't know. But I just wonder if what you're maybe experiencing is that there is an over tendency for the best female teachers to apply to you because of that context.
I don't know. Like, I've got a brilliant team, and everyone brings value. But it is something, and also from a parent point of view, it's interesting. Like, all of our parents' evenings, it's the women who rock up, and I really want to get the dads a bit more engaged.
Yeah, sure.
And I know you're going to ask me about Halalgate later on, but
I am.
I mean, it was predominantly men criticising me and predominantly women supporting me.
Do you mind if I because I've got a very specific question about that I'm jumping forward in my list.
Sorry,
of 10. No. But let's take this opportunity. One of the things I was really fascinated around that school meals incident, or Halalgate as you refer to it as, is that you suggested to me that there was part of the criticism was perhaps because the school lead, you, Hannah, is female. How did that come about?
It evolved. So basically, it started with one parent complaining about a halal kitchen.
Yeah.
his argument then turned into, and we don't allow packed lunches. And then it turned into, we only allow water. And that's what hit the press.
The headline was ridiculous.
The headline
the one that I saw in the Mirror was outrageous.
Well, the actual local press was fine. So
Okay.
when Oxford Mail contacted me the week before May half term and said they were going to run this article and would like to comment, and I gave them quite a bland response about who we are. Food education is really important to us. They sent me back the copy and it was fine. Like it wasn't inflammatory, and it went live on the Wednesday of half term. And then I was actually, ironically, having a wellbeing day at a spa on the Friday and came out floating from the jacuzzi. My phone literally went off, and it hit the national press. And I don't really know. It must have been a very quiet weekend at the Daily Mail, and Trump must have been behaving.
So Mail was first. I've read in the Mirror.
It went from the Oxford Mail to the Daily Mail.
Oh, went Oxford Mail to the Daily Mail. Because
Yeah.
I've read in the Mirror and in the Sun.
Oh, it went on every tabloid.
Yeah.
But by the Sunday, it was in every tabloid, and then it went on the BBC. So it ran on the regional BBC all day Monday, and went on to the national BBC on the Tuesday, and we had the BBC TV crew camped outside our school all day Tuesday. It was laughable because we serve water, because we have no packed lunches. Going back to the argument, no one really knew why they were arguing, and lots of different people had lots of different things to say, but a lot of it was about me taking away choice. But no one had really done their research as to why we'd taken away that choice. And as you alluded to earlier on, there was a misconception that I'd gone away on the Friday night and changed the policy on the Monday morning without consulting anyone. This had been our policy for 18 months from the get-go. All the parents knew that.
So it was literally from the school opening.
We were never going to, from the get-go. I'm very direct and very transparent. At all of our parent contact meetings, it'd all been explained. So 119 parents out of 120 were absolutely furious. On Facebook, Hannah has told us this from the beginning. The school have been honest from the beginning. Who is this parent causing this kind of stress for the school? It was just one dad who wasn't happy. I'd said to him in October, if you're not happy, choose a different school. We've got a waiting list. Your daughter's lovely. We want her to be here. But he didn't like that. He went to the governors. Like, the governor's about having a packed lunch. Are you kidding me? And his daughter loves the food and ate 3 courses every day. So I think it was a bit of a power struggle. And then it went viral. And then it became Facebook, crazy. Then I got hate emails, 70 of them. Then I got hate handwritten letters, 12 of them. Not from anyone in Didcot. I had an anonymous letter from the Daily Star reader in Hull who told me to move countries.
I don't want to go in terms of what was suggested or threatened, but what were the objections coming out? Was it to do with halal? Was it to do with gender? Was it to do with you? I mean,
a bit of everything. That we were daring to do things so differently. That we were patronising parents by removing choice.
I see.
That we were fueling xenophobia by making the kitchen halal. Which, again, do your research, like how many of our supermarkets, how many of our restaurants, how many of our fast food chains are serving us halal meat. People don't know what they're eating half the time. So it was just emotionally exhausting, in all honesty. But I suppose the blessing through it all was that it really galvanised our school. Our school staff became even stronger. Our parent body were like tiger mummies and backing me on every social media. And some of our incoming parents, he works at the Metro, they wrote the counter piece because they were so angry at the misrepresentation. And it's actually made some staff want to come and work with us they didn't know existed, and some parents want to send their kid to us. So although it was an exhausting week, it's not been detrimental to us. It was just laughable. It went from 0 to 100 overnight.
There's a couple of points I'd like to raise that I noticed. One is a word you used, which was misrepresentation. The first headline I ever read about it, which I read a few months back, and I read again, it's probably still open on my computer next door. It was, "School only serves water and halal meat." That was the headline.
Yeah, here's your chicken and here's your glass of water.
Yeah,
That's all you're having to eat
I
today.
read that and I thought, for me, having spent time in a school canteen, conceptually it was odd. So
we don't have a canteen, James. We have a dining hall.
I'm sorry, I don't know. I forgive me.
No, but for us,
that's actually an important point, isn't it? You're doing it right.
Ethos, and we all sit down on round tables as a family and use a knife and fork. I have spent 15 years in South London with kids eating 5 bits of chicken off a plate with their hands, wiping it on their jeans after playing football for 29 minutes, 1 minute before the bell goes wrong. Like, food should be part of the school curriculum, and it's not in a lot of schools. And for a lot of our kids, we've got like 33% PP. That's their only hot meal of the whole day. And the parents said, oh, my child doesn't drink water. They will at our school. My child doesn't eat this, that, and the other. They will at our school. Give it a week, sat next to their mates. They will eat chicken chow mein because everyone else is eating chicken chow mein. So I think for me, a school isn't just about getting exams. It's about the life skills, the social skills, the cultural skills. And that's what we do really, really well.
And that is actually, in a nutshell, my second point. I spent a lot of time in schools, a lot of time in colleges, and one of the things that I feel is far too frequently overlooked is the culture of health, specifically eating and hydrating within a school. And I haven't been to your school, so I don't know what it feels like exactly in the dining hall, but I'm sure it's really pleasant. I applaud you to my core that you took that on. Now, people can argue stylistically whether it should be this thing, there should be packed lunch or whatever. And I mean, obviously that's your school decision, that's fine. But I really, really appreciate a leader and a colleague who's willing to tackle that conversation. Never mind the halal thing, but is willing to tackle the conversation about health and nutrition for young people at school.
Thank you, James. And there's a layer also which we haven't really shouted about, but from an environmental point of view, I find it staggering how much waste there is in schools, from the cans, the bottles, the sandwich boxes. We don't have any of that because we don't do any of that kind of food. So our kids only drink water. They have to have a water bottle. We have cold water distillers throughout the school. So that significantly reduces our litter, and we only serve food that's plated. So from a green point of view, actually, there's a whole positive impact environmentally from this as well.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. What was the impact on you, Hannah? I mean, if you go to the middle of that week and perhaps a week later, how were you?
I was fine. It was exhausting. It was emotionally draining. And I think I lasted a week without crying, and then just one day, something stupid. I was just knackered. I burst into tears at work, and I do cry quite easily, but I wasn't going to cry because of that. But it was more of I'm just absolutely exhausted, sort of like teary moment. I think what I found the most startling was it did completely split the audience. I say all the time, I'm Marmite, our school's Marmite, I love Marmite. So you're going to love us or you're not going to love us. But if you don't love us, choose a different school. It's quite simple. But I was overwhelmed by the negativity, but I was equally overwhelmed by the positivity. And I had bouquets of flowers from people I didn't know. I had letters and phone calls from head teachers around the country. I had personal messages and presents and stuff sent to me from people who I do know but don't know. And I think was it Jeff Barton? Someone very prolific on Twitter, I think it might have been Jeff, said that it's opportunities like this that really show you how united we are as a profession. And you know that all the nonsense on Twitter about, are you a trad, are you a prog? I don't get involved in all that, but everyone downed their tools and actually just pulled together. And I got quite a lot of positivity about the blog I wrote about it all. I don't take things lying down. I wasn't going to stay at home and be upset and worried about it. Everyone else was saying their piece, and I wanted to get what was the truth, our truth, out there. That had 13,500 hits, which is just crazy.
That's great.
Crazy. And off the back of that, I think I had 30 disclosures from other head teachers around the country who had been totally victimised by the local or regional national press, just saying, like, well done for tackling it, because we need to. Otherwise, they're going to carry on treating us like this.
Well, I have to say, while in many ways I don't want the incident, there was actually not much of an incident.
It's quite laughable. It's quite laughable now. Back in May, when we were in the Daily Mail.
I mean, I don't really want it to be the focus of this conversation, but what I do want to say to you is I personally found it inspiring. As someone who, in a completely different context, has challenges at work and has difficult days, and I'm sure anyone listening and watching this will have those difficult days. I personally found the way it was dealt with really inspirational, and it's actually, whilst there's many other things to discuss with you, Hannah, really inspirational things, it's actually the trigger that caused me to contact you, because I thought I need to speak to this person, because if they handle something as tough as that well, I really want to know more about them.
Thank you. And I think ultimately, would I have handled it in the same way 3 years ago, pre-Women Ed? Perhaps not.
Would you handle it the same way today?
I'd handle it the same way now.
Yeah.
But I think sort of like pre-women ed, I've always been pretty confident and quite sort of like bold, but we've really found over the last couple of years a very supportive community, which you really draw strength from. I'm very conscious and aware of that I'm a role model to others, people I don't even know, because when you're on Twitter and talking at events, you are, whether you want to be or not. And with that comes responsibility. And we talk all the time at our events and online about sort of like finding your voice and using your voice and sort of like not being scared away by things. And I wouldn't have been being true to myself or true to us if I just sort of like taken that line down. I think the easier route would have been to go into my cave for a week and come back a week later and pretend it was all not happening. But I would have had respect for myself if I'd done that.
Well done, Hannah. Seriously. Inspirational stuff.
Let's hope it doesn't happen again.
There's always something around the corner. Maybe, that is a bit extreme to be another one around the corner. You never know. Let's move to Women Ed here. I mean, I think from my perspective, what I really want the viewer and the listener to hear about is initially about your experience of being a co-founder. Of course, we spent time chatting to Jill as well, who's legendary in my book. I'd like to ask you a bit about being a co-founder, and I'd also like you to bring us with Women Ed to whether there's an end game for the movement. What's it trying to achieve?
That's a really good question. So co-founding was one of those things that kind of happened to us. It was a sequence of different random things. It wasn't like we all woke up that Easter 4 years ago and said, "Oh, let's start a grassroots movement." It was an article, a blog by Helena Marsh and a blog by Dr. Jill Berry, which instigated a lot of chat on social media, which then kind of spiraled into a series of blogs on what was Staff Room, a brilliant blogging community. And literally 7 strangers came together over a weekend on social media. We didn't know we were all secondary school teachers. We didn't know we were all English teachers, which is random.
But you literally met physically, yeah?
No, it's all virtual.
Okay.
And we started a conversation about like how are we going to harness this interest. So then we initiated a meetup, and I got all of our postcodes and worked out where was equidistant. So we met.
It always ends up in Coventry, right?
No, but randomly we ended up in Bracknell.
Okay.
Having a cup of tea at the Hilton because we could all get off our motorways there, and literally had a chat about like, what is this? Like, what can we do with this? And we just decided to start a Twitter handle. That's all it was. Let's just start a Twitter handle and just share some gender equality articles and get a conversation going. That was in the May. And we tweeted out.
It's 2014.
2014. Yeah, it's our fourth year this year. We tweeted out. We think we might host like a little event. Like, any women out there interested in coming to talk about gender equality? Anyone got an empty school? And it just sort of spiraled from there. So Microsoft picked it up, offered us a free venue, offered us free catering, free tech support. We're like, oh, well, this is really easy. We chose a date. And then 200 people came together at the Microsoft head office in Victoria. And it all kind of snowballed really, really quickly. We didn't really know who we were or what we were, but there was quite a lot of excitement. And the first event was just amazing. I don't think we're ever going to... Like, every event's exciting, but that event really... You could really feel kind of a palpable kind of energy in the room. And then we sat down post that event and kind of took stock and... Like, who are we? Like, what we're trying to achieve? This has all got a bit big, a bit quickly. We've all got full-time jobs. So we then put out for volunteers, and we recruited 40 regional volunteers, and tried to make more of a regional, local offer as opposed to going for like bigger national events.
Often make a big difference. Yeah, as well.
And also it's not about the 7 of us doing all the work. It's about creating opportunities, and the volunteers develop their leadership skills by.
Absolutely.
So it's that distribution, and sort of like we are a collective. We are a soft community. No one's in charge. No one's getting paid. No one's dictatorial. So it kind of evolved from there. It's just picked up momentum. For the first couple of years, it was very much kind of the girls are doing it for themselves. And then we got a bit more traction from kind of the wider educational sphere. We've presented at the Education Festival, Research Ed. We've done some consulting with Charter College and a DFE. And I think I think initially people probably thought it was a bit faddy or a bit whimsical, but then they realised we were here to stay. And once you get past your kind of your 10,000 followers, and now we're at 20,000, the naysayers and the trolls began to quieten down. Because I think in the beginning there was quite a lot of negativity, quite a lot of friction. Again, it was Marmite, it split the audience. We had a lot of haters, but
on the basis of this isn't necessary type hating, or
on the basis of anyone having an excuse to have an argument about anything. We're a female-heavy profession. Why do we need more women? Like sort of like the anti-feminist movement, but also the women who hadn't had any support and didn't know why people would need support. The Margaret Thatchers of the world, the kind of the shut the door when rather than bring people up with you. So so it kind of just picked up, and then a year and a half ago, we got a lot of interest beyond the UK. So I went over to Banff and launched Women Ed Canada. We've got Women Ed US picking up momentum, Women Ed Italy.
Wow.
So what's interesting, when I went to Banff, I was at a 3-day leadership residential, and it was 1,200 and a mixed audience. And that was the biggest event I'd spoken at about Women Ed, but also it wasn't necessarily a warm audience because we were on the main stage in a different country, mixed audience. Not everyone wanted to hear about Women Ed, but Patty Solberg was on our panel as a he for she, and he used the data really, really well to hook in those who might say we're not needed. And when he compared all the global contextual data about the state of the world when it comes to women and girls, that just left everyone very quiet. You can't really argue with Patty Solberg using sort of like the data to tell you why we need it. So going back to your original question, what's the end game? I don't know. Like, a few people have said to me in the last year, like, you've got so much going on, are you going to like stop doing Women Ed? And I got asked to interview, like, how do I square my 2 jobs? It's like, well, Women Ed's not a job. It's a hobby. It's something I volunteer.
It's a philosophy, right?
It's a philosophy, and like what I say, because people kind of dip in and out of it, depending on where you're at in your life, personally, professionally. It's there for you to access, but there's no pressure for you to be constantly accessing it. And it's now kind of got a life of its own, and it's about everything in balance, isn't it? About how many events you want to go to and how involved you want to be. I've met amazing people through it. I travelled to Mozambique because of it. So do you mean, why would I stop doing something that's very much part of who I am? And whilst I'm still enjoying it, I'll carry on.
Good for you. And I mean, we spoke at length with Jill, and she made very similar comments. She talked a lot about the impact on her, and also for her, it was a lot about sharing and the distribution of that experience, which I think is wonderful to see. Did Women Ed start before BayMed, or was it the way around? I can't actually remember now.
We started first.
Women Ed was first.
BayMed's only 2 years old.
Oh, BayMed's only 2 years.
So Women Ed's 4 years old, BayMed's 2 years old, LGBT Ed's a year old, and Disability Ed's coming. BayMed kind of got born from Women Ed because we obviously had a mixed audience, and we tried to get conversations going about diversity, and only 4 or 5 people came at some of our bigger events. And Alana, who's the co-founder with Amjad, who works with me, she was one of our regional leaders, and intersectionality was becoming more and more topical. And yeah, I mean, I'm a big advocate of it, but I think there's quite a Venn diagram of overlapping communities. So we had an event at my place last year called Diverse Educators, because my deputy head wears all the labels. Does she need to go to 4 events? Today I'm going to be BAME, today I'm going to be a woman, today I'm going to be LGBT. So that actually, we don't compartmentalise ourselves into these boxes. So we hosted an event, and it was brilliant, where we brought all the grassroots diversity and equality together. And then we also went to the DFE for a round table with Nick Gibb about trying to coordinate and make it more coherent about what's going on nationally.
And I guess ultimately, these movements exist, are necessary and beneficial because we have such a tradition of patriarchy and segmented power and authority in our society. And I think it's very easy to have the thought of it shouldn't be necessary, but actually in that historical context, the reality is it is necessary.
It's very necessary. And if you think about the power of the network and the Old Boys network in particular,
absolutely.
And I mean, I do lots of presentations about networking and being outward facing. other professions, there is an expectation that you will network. There's an expectation that part of your professional identity is to go to conferences and go to dinner parties and meet people. And it's not part of the teaching profession, but why not? Because actually we can spend our whole day in our classroom, in our school, not talking to other human beings, not sharing ideas.
Does Women Ed have ambitions for International Women's Day at all?
We do stuff every year.
Yeah. So how does that work?
Well, International Women's Day is a global date which anyone can celebrate.
8th
of March. Yeah. So we always host events around the country on International Women's Day.
And internationally, this is an enormous event.
It's massive.
It's huge.
It's massive. We're basically doing International Women's Day on a weekly, monthly basis.
Sure.
But I've been in contact with them this week about doing something a bit more partnership based with them this year. So we always use their hashtags and their theme. So last year their theme was Be Bold for Change. That's the year before. This year it was Press for Progress. Mm-hmm. So we always sort of like get onto their sort of like mission statements. But the thing is, like going back to what I was saying about Canada, what I found fascinating was it was exactly the same conversation. It was exactly the same testimonials and narratives and barriers and challenges. And your gender identity, your professional identity as a teacher, doesn't matter what country you're in, it's quite similar. Yeah. And I think that was quite interesting.
I want to ask you a tough question here, Hannah. I'm not even totally sure it's a fair question, but I'm genuinely interested in your opinion on this. In fact, I'm going to read it to you because I wrote it with a very careful wording, so I'm going to read it to you. Do you believe that today in the UK there is equality of opportunity for boys and girls?
In the classroom, in society, or at large?
I think I mean broadly. Do you think we've reached a theoretical equality?
Theoretically, there is in the UK. It's whether or not everyone knows it or takes advantage of it, I guess. Like going back to what I was saying about my childhood, I mean, I think different family setups, different households, different communities, there are definitely still barriers. And when you look at the data about the number of girls taking science A-levels compared to the number of women going into the science profession, there are still very much glass ceilings there. But what we talk about at Women Ed is, are those glass ceilings self-imposed or society imposed? So
it's almost like we've got to a position of theoretical opportunity, maybe even theoretical equality of provision, but the equality of esteem is still a work in progress.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by all the Dove research, the Self-Esteem Project, and I've done a lot of work with them. Two of my friends used to be the brand directors, and in America, every single school uses that project, and in the UK, we don't. And I did some work with them, making it more sort of like school friendly, and it's all about girls between age 7 and 9 lose their self-confidence. And there's an assumption or presumption at secondary school that it happens when they go through puberty. No, when we get them at 12, 13, it's already done. And I'd done a lot of reading on it, but then I saw it happen before my eyes with my niece, and she literally turned 8 and lost all her confidence. And she went from being this confident girl who would climb trees and would be sort of like out with the boys holding her own, doing quite physical stuff, to just like retreating into herself.
That's very interesting.
It was really interesting, and I talked to my sister about it at length. And it was a confidence issue. And at the moment I'm doing some research into Aureus, and I'm looking at why sort of like boys are more confident in the classroom and talk more than girls in the classroom. So I've been doing a research project with our year 7s, but my nephew's in year 8 and my niece is in year 5. So I thought it'd be really interesting to interview them as comparisons. And it was just fascinating listening to my very confident nephew who will happily get up in assembly and read a poem and doesn't care if he makes any mistakes. And then talking to my niece who is so worried about making mistakes. So I think there's a deeper thing for us to work on there. And that's where we're trying to strike the balance at Women Ed about empowering our peers and sort of working with women who are our generation about closing the gap, but also making sure that we're changing the narrative moving forward. What legacy are we creating in our own schools?
It's really fascinating. I say we because Marta, my partner, is a little over here. We have 2 daughters, and it's a conversation that runs through my mind fairly frequently about what are the specific features of the equality that we experience today, because I think it's very easy to assume equality. I very frequently see equality, and I think that's something we should be proud we've moved much closer towards. but I do feel that the equality of esteem is some way off. And I include the glass ceiling effect. I include the range of role models. I include the conversations we all hold from a very, very early age in children's lives, and what we may inadvertently and subconsciously encourage them towards and away from.
And the comments we use, and all that research about we compliment girls and how they look and boys and what they do, and all the gender cheese stuff about T-shirts in the supermarkets. We're opening the primary school next week, and thinking about uniforms has been really interesting at both schools. And I was reading an article in one of the early years magazines about if we encourage more girls to wear trousers or shorts in the early years, they lose their inhibitions. Whereas as soon as they start wearing skirts and become more conscious of their gender, they sit differently, they behave differently in primary school. I thought that was really interesting, that is gender is a social construct, and we are disabling or encouraging inhibitions in some ways.
That's a fascinating conversation. That one's probably one we don't have much time for today, but that how does gender truly represent itself? To what degree is it a biological and sociological condition? I find that a true, and my mind changes on that quite regularly. Not from extreme to extreme, but within that ongoing reflection is something I really find fascinating. I think in the world we live in today, where the influence of that sort of French philosophical movement of the individual from the 60s, it's coming to fruition today, where you can literally be anything you want to be. And I think it's fascinating how people are applying that, and also the reaction it gets, sometimes very aggressive reaction.
Well, I've been following all the pride fallout between the LGBT community and the kind of the trans community. And our keynote speaker last year at the Diverse Educators was Claire Birkinshaw, who was, I believe, one of the first openly trans head teachers to go through transition. And she's just such a powerful speaker. And she just shared, we went for dinner the night before, she shared some really interesting anecdotes. And the one that really stays with me is that she's got grown-up children who are at university. And she was speaking at an event, and I think it was her daughter was with her. And one of the local politicians was trying to be politically correct and asked the daughter how it felt for her mother to be speaking. And the daughter said, "No, that's my dad." "Oh, but she's a woman now." "Yeah, but she's still my dad. I've got a mum." And it's just interesting that just blows your mind about the people trying to do the right thing, not knowing what they can and can't say, but actually it's your body's this, but your sexuality's this, and your gender identity's this.
We kind of haven't been trained for this.
No.
Our society is not broad as to I think we have to a degree a binary code. I mean, or a binary indoctrination in the way we think, and I think that is somewhat outdated in the modern era. One of the phrases I hear you talk about, Hannah, is the concept of value-led leadership. What is that, and how do you apply it through your work?
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because that question at interviews, and what kind of a leader are you? And people always come out with their kind of like list of things you do and don't say. And I had like some process. It was actually through Sue Webb. So I went on quite a journey as assistant head, as a deputy head, and I wasn't mentally really sort of in the place to be a head teacher 3-4 years ago. I was looking to relocate and looking for a sideways move. And then I had a lot of coaching, talking to people like Jill, and I realised that perhaps I was ready to be a head, but I wasn't ready to be the head in the mould of what I was experiencing in South London where I was working. So I started doing lots of research into different leadership styles, and there's lots of different ways of calling it: ethical leadership, principled leadership, values-based leadership. And Sue Webb's one of our community, who's a former primary head, and she's a consultant for VBE. And she had shared quite a lot on Twitter. And I followed her, started looking into it. And Dr. Neil Hawkes, who founded VBE, did his whole doctorate looking at values-led school models. It just really resonated. It was like a light bulb moment that suddenly I saw the kind of leader I was being defined, I suppose, on paper. So I read his book. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times now. And then it made me realise that actually that's the kind of head I wanted to be. That's the kind of school I wanted to work in. So when I then decided I was looking for headship, I was looking for opportunities to be authentic, to be the kind of the leader I wanted to be, rather than wedge myself into someone else's kind of mould. And that's why the startup founding headship model, even though it's harder, I believe, there's a lot more sort of like to get your head around a lot quicker. I saw that as an opportunity to do things a little bit differently. I've worked in lots of turnaround schools where it's always about year 11, it's always about the catch-up game, it's always about the kind of the intervention, and to not have that pressure for a few years, to be able to make some different decisions at Key Stage 3 and to grow that culture and ethos from scratch, that was kind of my motivation, really.
Would I even find your values in your building? Because you were involved in the design and the
well,
development?
It's interesting when you become the startup head, but the designs were signed off 3 years before you were appointed. We've got a beautiful building. Our school is absolutely gorgeous. I was a consultant on some of the aesthetics, so we haven't yet splashed them all over, because I love Mary Myatt's quote about values aren't laminated, they're lived, and I don't want us to fall into the trap of we need to have our 12 values painted on every wall if everyone to remember them. Our kids know what our values are. Our
they should
staff
feel
and
them
parents
almost.
Yeah, we've got a very strong culture and ethos. It's all values led. We have lots of daily, weekly tasks. It's constant drip feed, drip feed, drip feed. And I think the difference is that because we've designed the school from scratch and we've co-created it from scratch, all of those things aren't being shoehorned in, or they're not being put on as frames to evidence something. They've been part of the thread from the beginning, and all those jigsaw pieces then come together. So it is palpable. The children can tell you very eloquently and confidently what our 12 values are. And we're going into year 2, so it's now about embedding and deepening that understanding, and really thinking about how the values show up in the building.
That's fantastic. And I mean, if I may, in an educational climate today, which can be pressurizing, it's quite changeable. There's even some fads out there. For you, what are the most essential values for you as a leader? What do you want to come out first, second, and third?
So that's an interesting question. So post my appointment, pre my team starting, I'd recruited them. I had in my head what my core values were, and I had what values I wanted to stamp on our school. And then when Sue and I sat down and talked about how to value scope the staff body, she quite delicately said to me, "You've got quite strong opinions. Like, how prepared are you to relinquish some of your values?" And I was like a little bit horrified, like why would I be relinquishing this to you? She goes, because like your school values need to reflect your whole community. So from your list, you need to distill down to your core. So I had the 10 that I was quite keen on. And then when we all came together for a whole day just thinking about our values, and we started like macro and drilled down as the day progressed, I basically held on to the 3 that I wanted to be part of our core, and then the other 9 came from the wider community. And it was interesting because my 3, I think, probably had recruited most of my staff anyway, and the diversity, equality and wellbeing. So, I mean, we're a STEAM school. We were a STEM school. We've made it a STEAM school. In a single-sex local environment, we're very boy-heavy, and we want to make sure that we are modelling that you don't have to be a white boy to be a scientist, and we're doing lots around kind of diversity of our team, the community. So that's key. I've got openly gay staff who've done assemblies about their sexuality, like just taking off some of those inhibitors. Equality. I mean, I couldn't have a school without equality being up sort of like first and foremost, but it's fascinating when you hear mirrored back to you what you said in assembly. So I can remember just dropping into assembly about 6 months ago, saying about social equality and the pay gap, and about the fact that everyone in our building was paid the same, whatever their level. And one of the boys has really held on to this, and then he asked me in a separate conversation 6 months later, "So miss, in our school, like the cleaners paid the same amount of money as the head teacher, aren't they?" I said, what do you mean? And she said, "Oh, you know," he said, "in assembly," he said, "everyone gets paid the same." I said, "No, they get paid the same no matter what their gender is for their tier. We haven't got everyone being paid the same salary." So it's interesting conversations like that. And then the well-being one, because we know it's an issue in society, in our schools.
It is an issue.
The staff well-being, the parent well-being, the pupil well-being. we have got a whole curated provision about our mental health and our well-being, and we're very much focusing on like proactive, preventative, preemptive work rather than reactive work. I've spent, like I said, 15 years working with year 11s at crisis point at interview, exams. So we're doing daily stuff and weekly stuff to prevent that from exploding, as opposed to the kind of the 2 weeks yoga because you're anxious about your exams.
Yeah.
So they were the three for us, and then we've
How
got
lucky
the
those
12.
kids are. How fortunate they are. I think that's great. I mean, those values, equality, diversity, well-being. I mean, you can plant that in any walk of life. You can place that on any organisation, and it makes a positive benefit. If those children and those students are experiencing that day after day after day after day, and it integrates with them and who they are as individuals, I think that's super powerful.
What's really interesting, Joanne, is that it really helps dialogue, and it really helps reflection and rewards, but it actually really helps behaviour and sanctioning. So, I mean, I've been a head of year, I've been assistant head and deputy head, I've done all those difficult conversations where you're isolating a child or excluding a child, and you don't always get the parents agreeing with the sanction. When you have a phone call or a meeting or a letter and you say your child is being sanctioned because they contravened the value of love, or they've contravened the value of respect, there's no arguing with it.
It's hard to argue with that.
So
right?
I think it almost softens the message sometimes. Our explanations are really crystal clear, and show me a parent who doesn't want their child to embody some sort of key human values when they leave.
Absolutely. It's magnificent, Hannah. I'm incredibly grateful to you today. It may or may not show in this video. It certainly may be heard in this video. In the last 5 minutes, we've had Mr. Clank out there. But I'm extremely grateful to you today. You're the first person who's been willing or come and sat with us in these chairs and recorded video with us. We have big plans for this initiative. We've got things we've got to improve, not least that. But I'm extremely grateful to you. I also want to say on a personal level, I find you, the way you speak, the way you represent yourself, the centrality of the values in your work, I personally find those inspirational. As part of me wishes we'd crossed paths earlier when I was
working down the road
schools.
first.
But I really do want to congratulate. I want to repeat as well my congratulations to you for the way that you managed that difficult period a few months back. I do find that inspirational, and finally, I just want to say as well, I hope we can continue this conversation, and I hope this can serve this resource, whatever it is we've produced today, can also serve for you to share some messaging with your community, your school community, and broader community. And hopefully this is going to really elevate the conversation for anyone who listens or watches what we've talked about today. Hannah Wilson, thank you very, very much.
Thanks, James.
I've improved by a whole grade.
I've improved.
By a whole grade. By a whole grade.
By a whole grade.
My teacher isn't just Mr. Maddock. It's a whole teaching team made up of James, Mike and Marta.
My classroom's all about doing and applying. My days standing at the front of the classroom with a PowerPoint are long gone.
I master every concept by learning at my own pace.
I spend 100% of my class time interacting and supporting individual students.
I move on only when the moment is right for me, not the whole class.
I know what each and every student is mastering and struggling on at every moment.
I know exactly what I need to learn next, and I can go back and review material at any time.
I spend my teaching time supporting and inspiring, not planning, delivering and marking.
I can learn from anywhere at any time.
I can switch off when school closes, knowing they are learning from the best.
My teacher has my homework marked before I get to class.
I set every piece of homework at the start of the year.
I'm 2 weeks ahead of my expected progress.
I can track everyone's progress with a swipe of a finger.
I can track my own progress and set my own targets.
I now have time to focus on developing the skills of every learner in my classroom.
I know exactly what it means to explain, evaluate and analyse, and I'm not afraid of any exam.
My lessons are now far more about the skills and the application, not just the content itself.
I've completely remodeled what it means to be a teacher in my classroom.